Welcome to the Ardan Labs podcast. Our special guest today is Roxy Rodriguez-Becker. Oh, Roxy, I've been excited to talk with you. I've got a bunch of guests lined up this week, but you are the one I've been wanting to talk to. You just started showing up on my Twitter feed, which I don't know why. Twitter's gotten really weird. I like old Twitter where my feed used to be pretty consistent. Now it's like, I guess I don't use any of the other apps, so I feel like it's what Instagram would or TikTok would look like today. Anyway, regardless of that, you started showing up on my Twitter feed. I don't know why, but I thought your background was interesting, and I thought you'd be a unique guest for the show. So, one, thank you for joining us and talking us today. All right, I ask everybody in the beginning to kind of give everyone the 2-minute spiel on what they're doing today.
Okay, so I am currently a librarian information specialist. I'm a middle school librarian, and I taught math for about 10 years. And about a year and a half ago, I started the transition into tech. Right now, like through programs like 100 Devs and Scrimba, I'm a front end dev, but I'm trying to finish the 100 Devs program so that I can be full stack.
I've never heard of the 100 Devs program. I'm actually really new to all these programs that are sort of out there. Like I know of the boot camps. My wife took a boot camp at Iron Hack, and she learned like for 3 months all the front end stuff. So I'm kind of familiar with that. But talk to me a little bit about this 100. What did you call it again? The 100
Devs.
100 Devs. What is that?
So it's completely free, and Leon Noel runs it, and he's very motivational. He has all his classes organized. There have been 2 cohorts, and the second one was recorded and put on YouTube. And so that's where you watch the classes. They have a whole website where you can get the homework, do the homework, and then he still meets live. He streams on Discord a couple times a week to check in with everyone, and then he participates in Hunttober with everyone looking for tech jobs and helps them.
Wow.
So whether they're in the cohort or not. Totally free. Everything, all the resources that he offers and gives, and it's totally free.
Wow. So he came up with this. It's kind of self-study, but you're in a cohort, so you have to be at a certain place every week, and he's showing up and he's helping you try to find work. And wow, this is amazing. I can't wait. I got to get this in the show notes. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
How did you? All right. And I'm going to ask more questions. So
yes.
I don't know if you listen to any of the podcasts that I had out there. Okay, cool.
You like to be chronological.
I do. So that's funny, Roxy, because when my wife and I, like even with the kids, we're watching a movie, and the movie's bouncing sort of randomly back and forth in time, I can't handle it. My brain shuts down. I don't mind going back for a little bit if you come back, but the moment you're all over the place, my wife will just look at me. She goes, "You're not enjoying this." I'm like, "No."
I'm the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, which I find interesting.
Too much to follow.
It's just my brain doesn't work, but I know that when they make these movies, they have to do it completely out of order. So I don't even know if I could be an actor, because I just don't know how somebody can get into a scene. Imagine you're filming like near the end of a movie, day one, and you're supposed to already have all this emotional baggage.
That's true.
The actors that do that are so impressive.
Yeah.
It's so impressive.
Yeah. Okay. I would need to like lead up to it. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to get, when we're almost done, we're going to get to how you found this boot camp and all of this. I want to get there, but we got to get there first. So
yes,
I'm going to throw you into the time machine. This is going to be your favorite part, and you're going to tell me what year you graduated from high school and where you were.
I have to reveal that. Okay.
Yes, we have to. I need to know what tech was like, and don't worry, you're not older than me. I'm the old man in the room. It's okay.
I graduated high school in 2001.
Nice. 2001. Here's my next question. Here we go. Now, don't think hard. Clear your head. Give me that first memory, thought when you were on a computer, like banging on the keys and doing something that you thought was pretty cool or wild?
When I was in elementary school, my dad's job moved us to Saudi Arabia for a couple years, and one of our
Wow.
classes, yeah, one of our classrooms had like a whole wall of computers, and I hadn't seen a lot of computers back then. And I remember getting really into Prince of Persia on the
Wow.
computers in class.
And everything is in English at that point for you when you're in school?
Yes, yeah, we did learn Arabic, kind of like you learn Spanish as a, elective and stuff. But yeah, we did learn Arabic. So at my current job, we have some students from Saudi Arabia, and I'll bust out just like count to 10 or something, and they're like, "Well,
So you retained you retained some of the basics even from
yeah,
being there
yeah,
for a couple years. It's
hmm
really sad, Roxy, because I've been in Miami since 1994, and all I can do is speak food, as I call it. I say I can speak food. I can go in a restaurant and order what I want, but I can't. My brain was never able to. My tongue and my brain. I don't know what it is. I couldn't learn the language at all. And now my wife is Colombian, so I don't have to speak anything at this point.
my family's Cuban, and half of them are in Miami, so
Oh,
I go
nice,
there at
nice.
least once a year. We used to go there more
Nice.
often, but kids.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, that's cool. Okay, so wow, so you spent how old, do you remember kind of how old you were when you were when your
Yeah,
parents?
I was 8, 9, 10, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's an age where you would still remember a little bit
Oh
your
yeah,
time
it
there.
was really cool because we I went to the international school, and it was still relatively new. So some of the classrooms were in, we call them T shacks, but the temporary buildings. And during recess, we would go hunt for geodes, like out in the like surrounding desert.
What's a geo?
The geode, those like roundish rocks, and you bust them open, and they're like crystals.
Oh, okay. Okay. And then after a couple years, what happened? It was just time to move again. You got a different
Yes.
dad got a
Yeah.
different job.
So we went between Florida, California, Texas, and Saudi Arabia for a few years, and we finally settled in Sugar Land, Texas when I was in fifth grade.
Can
The end
what
of fifth grade.
what did your dad was your dad or your mom that was causing you to jump around? Your dad's job?
My dad, yeah, he was an
What
electrical engineer.
okay, that's super interesting. Do you remember like wow. Okay, see these are all the I love these sort of stories because I was fortunate. Maybe it's not fortunate. Like I had my entire childhood in one house for 20 years, right? Like I don't have any comprehension of having to move and start over with friends. Not until I went to sort of college. So, but you just
Yeah,
did
it
that
was.
over, yeah.
Oh no, I think it was a really awesome experience. During our summer vacations, the my dad's company would pay for our travel. So sometimes instead of going to the US, we would explore like different parts of Europe, and it was very eye-opening. And I remember in high school just kind of getting the itch to like move again. But I mean, we didn't, but it's something that kind of stayed with me, I think.
All right, so let's talk about high school. So you did the your 4 years of high school in Texas.
Mhm.
Where you said okay. What things were you sort of interested in high school? What was Roxy like into? What was Roxy
Oh
doing?
gosh. I was so sheltered. I wouldn't even know myself in high school. My dad made me study math a lot in middle school and high school at the kitchen table with my sister, like, just like people retell it with like the kids getting upset and because the dad, he wants you to get the right answer. And so I studied a lot of math. I was really good at algebra. In ninth grade, I got the award at the end of the school year for having the highest algebra grade. And then because I went to a private school for middle school, I had to do summer school to make up for some missing credits that I didn't have. And so I was just constantly in school. I was in choir. So that was a big part of my life, and school choir. And I did something called the PALS program, where you visit surrounding elementary schools, and you're assigned to a student who kind of needs to come out of their shell a little more. And so I worked with kids a lot, and yeah, I was a singing hostess for Macaroni Girl. I don't know if they have any Macaroni Girls over there, But
We used to, but I don't remember them singing at Macaroni Grill. They used to
yeah,
sing.
so the hostesses, yeah, so instead of like all the wait staff getting together and singing happy birthday, the hostesses would sing in classical Italian.
I get the impression that you were good at math, but did you enjoy math?
I did not at first, while my dad was like, kind of pushing it on me because he really wanted my sister and I to be engineers, of course. But I did really like excelling in it. And then actually after college,
Oh, we can't talk about that yet.
I know.
No, 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 college. Don't jump,
Okay,
don't
okay,
jump, don't
okay. I
jump.
caught myself. I caught myself. I caught myself.
But is your dad still alive? Your parents still alive?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay, cool, cool.
Yeah, they both it's their birthday month. They both have birthdays in September.
All right, so dad is sort of pounding the idea of engineering and math into you. You're more than capable of doing it, but anytime somebody's kind of pushing or forcing something on you, it's never going to be
Yep.
the same as if you really want to do it. Like,
Yes,
um,
exactly. Yes.
yeah.
So
Which
I really got into, yes.
no, go on, go on, go on.
Oh, I really became interested in psychology. I took psychology in high school, and honestly, late 90s, early 2000s, it didn't feel like you had a lot of options when it came to careers. My family was very much like doctor, lawyer, dentist. Like these are the things and engineer. Like these are all the things you need to do. And so I remember in my not my history class, but it was my history teacher. I think it economic, no, maybe economics. Anyway, we had to like choose a career and kind of like build a life around it, just sort of, for the future. And I didn't know what to do. So I was like, okay, well, okay, I see my dad who's an engineer. My mom was a part-time x-ray technician. And then I have, teachers everywhere around me because I'm in school. So I chose teaching. And so I just kind of went with it. And, you know, I didn't really think I was going to be a teacher because after I took psychology, I became really interested in the way people think and interact and everything. So, I ended up choosing psychology as a major, just not knowing, not being aware of my options. Uh, it's, it wasn't like it is now where you can look up whatever you want or you can random stumble upon a video of, a career that you never even heard about. So it was just very different. I feel like I was just very limited in what I saw around me and
So
who I looked up to.
that's why you said you were kind of sheltered. In other words, like you had this sort of almost like an expectation that you were going to be doing sort of one of those three things. But I can get a sense now that like, when you're ready to graduate high school and now you've got to figure out what the next step is. College was the only option. Like the thought of you telling your parents you were going
Hmm.
to go to college was probably scarier than actually even trying to do it. But it sounds like you decided then, like, so what do you decide? You know, you have to go to college. There's no other way around it. But you're falling in love with psychology. So, like, what's the choice you make that you have, and then with your parents' expectation?
Well, so I say I was very sheltered, and I was. Um, but my sister and I were also very lucky because my parents, they grew up in Cuba and they immigrated in the 70s, and it was very hard life for them. And then, of course, I mean, you live in Miami, so I'm sure you've heard stories like this all the time. But it was, they worked really hard. And so, of course, they were trying to make it so that we wouldn't have to. And so, my sister and I did grow up like I mean, we were sheltered, but we were also spoiled. And so when I got to college, I, I mean, I had to call, I had to, I don't think I even called home. I think I called a friend to ask like do I have to separate my whites and my darks, like like I just even doing laundry I was I had to. It was very eye-opening going to school away from home because that's really when I started to find myself. I grew up in a Cuban household, a Catholic household, and so it was always there was always like guilt. You always had just like
Uh,
guilt over just anything. And I remember every 2 weeks I would go home and I would come back and I would be this like kind of stiffer person for a day or two. And then finally I would just like, okay, I'd like relax and be myself again. And
but
so it was just a very interesting experience.
what schools were on your sort of? So I'm So I completely understand the whole Latin household situation. Living in Miami, you hear these stories, and even all my Cuban friends, all their kids went to the private schools. Education is a massive thing. You don't mess with the education from high school to college. And for those who are listening, a lot of people who came from Cuba, doctors, lawyers, especially like in the 60s in the Castro time, all these people had to leave Cuba. They also left their careers behind. It was a really
Mhm.
complicated situation for a lot of Cubans that came here, because now suddenly they didn't have a license to be a doctor, and all the
Mhm.
Cubans here in Miami are hardworking, so they pick up a broom, they do whatever they have to do
Yeah.
um,
Oh yeah.
to work. So education is this like major thing in the Latin community. In Miami,
Yeah.
it's probably more private schools than public schools, because um, that's kind of where a lot of the kids go. So I
Mhm.
imagine now that you're going to pick a college. What is that process like? Do you have a bunch of sort of colleges that you want to go to, and then fields of study? You must be having that conversation.
So again, I remember I did meet with my counselors a lot around that time. I don't remember our exact conversations because you know, my parents were not aware of. My dad went to, I think he went to the University of Georgia when he lived over there. He went to the University of Houston here. But other than that, like they're not too experienced, or they didn't know much about other schools. So I applied to like the main Texas schools, University of Texas, Texas A&M probably, U of H because my dad went there. And I ended up getting into the University of Texas. So I moved to Austin. And Austin's a pretty liberal city. And so my mom is always like, when you lived in Austin, like that was when I was ruined.
Oh man. Yeah, but right now the Longhorns number one right now, AP poll. You had to get a little bit into college football when you were there. I mean, it's such a big thing
Oh
at
yeah,
that
yeah, I did go to
university.
the games. Yeah, I don't follow them much anymore. My husband went to A&M, but he's, I guess, what they call a two percenter. So I'm like, I guess I'm kind of that way as well.
Nice.
But
So, did you just go to university with the idea that you're going to figure out what you want to learn when you're there, or you had a little bit of a plan?
so yeah, I figured that I was going to go to graduate school because I know with a psychology degree you're pretty limited. So while I was at UT, I was an RA. I applied to be a resident um, advisor, and so I worked in the dorms my second year, and then for the next couple years I was a resident advisor, which was nice because then my room and board is paid for, my food and room and board is paid for and everything. And that was really fun. That was actually, I thought that was a really good life experience as well, just with being on call and having to manage all these young adults. Like it was very interesting. And so, that I feel like, unfortunately for my parents, my undergraduate degree was basically discovering just who the heck I am. Like, I wasn't this, like, this just someone's daughter, that was going to do everything that they wanted.
No, but that's fair. I
I had
mean,
my own interests and my own brain. And yeah.
but when by the time you finish that degree, you've got what do you have, a BA, BS in psychology when you finish that?
Yeah. Yes, and I ended up really loving my marriage and family therapy class. So I thought I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to graduate, and then I'll apply to graduate school, try to become a marriage and family therapist. But then by the time I graduated, I really was not interested in going to graduate school, and I don't know who brought this to my attention. There was an alternate certification program for teaching, and I decided to teach math in order to stay on my parents' insurance. I was taking some more college math classes. I ended up getting the highest grade in my trig class and didn't have to take the final. And tutoring people in my college algebra class. So, but I was like, oh, if y'all think I'm a freshman, that's cool. I'm actually like, I'm actually graduated already, um, but yeah, so that was really fun taking those math classes, and in hindsight, it's like it probably would have been just fine if I had done that, for my undergrad. But, if something gets pushed on you so much, you're just like, no thanks.
It's funny that you finish this degree, your psychology degree, and you decide that you don't want to go to, because all of my kids were kind of like number three right now is the same. Like she graduated and didn't want to do any more schooling. Like, Dad, I need a break, right?
Yeah.
Um, so you were like, I need a break. You didn't go and look for some job in your field at that point. You decided to, like, yeah,
I I don't know if I knew of anything that I could do within psychology undergrad that was psychology related, other than like my minor was in educational psychology. So I worked in an after school program for a while I started the classes, but then you would get hired kind of on probation, and as you continue to take the classes, I guess we're education is just like in waves, and sometimes there's too many teachers and sometimes there's not enough, and I think at the time there just weren't enough in that school district, or they wanted to work in that school district.
I had two buddies when I went to university that graduated with the psychology degree. This was, say, 1991. One ended up becoming into all the hearing aid. I want to say hearing aids, but it's more than that. Like hearing problems and hearing aids and working with seniors on hearing. I don't know how that ever tied to psychology, but it did. My other buddy ended up working in nursing homes doing stuff with that degree. And it's always stuck in my head that uh, these two individuals had the psychology degree and then they ended up sort of in these fields. I took a computer science track and I'm doing computer science. Like that, my brain works that way. But I never saw a connection, but kind of that's what they sort of did. But you're moving more into an education sort of direction. But did you ever think at university to take education classes or to go down that
No,
track?
not no. I think when it came time to decide on a minor, I think the classes that I already had kind of lined up to where they supported choosing educational psychology, because I didn't discover the marriage and family class till close to the end, marriage and family therapy. But I don't know, maybe it was just because I worked with kids for a couple years in high school that it kind of just stuck with me. What interested me the most in my psychology classes is like finding the root of a problem, or trying to, like, what happened in your life that is making you, be this way, or what could have led to, this characteristic, even like, not even, I don't know. It's funny because whenever the pandemic hit, like I was one of those people that was like, who is patient zero? Like, I just was like, I want to find the root.
But why family? Like, there's a lot of different areas, right? Why marriage and family? I feel like that is going to be the most heartbreaking of. I went through a divorce. It was horrific, right? And I had to go through like forced, sessions, right? And if you don't want to talk to somebody, you're being forced. It's pretty brutal. But why that specifically?
From what I remember, I loved my professor, and we were in small groups, and we basically like rotated through being the patient or the client. I don't remember what it's called.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so yeah, so we would practice, and I mean, this also feels like just another time in my life, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it was just kind of getting to the root. I just, for some, the square root. No,
It feels
I don't
almost
know.
engineering-esque, isn't it? Like the
Yes,
engineering
it
is
does,
coming
doesn't
back.
it?
Like I'm not going to do engineering, Dad, but here I am
I
applying
know.
engineering
It's
to everything
like,
I do.
yeah, it's ingrained, and yeah,
And then you're
I've just
like
been,
looking for the algorithm that matches like you're going crazy, right? You're getting
yes,
yeah.
yeah,
It's
there you
interesting.
go.
So, okay, so you graduate in 2005, you spend a couple of years doing this, but at some point do you make a decision to go back to school or start looking for a career? Like what happens?
So I did the
You know,
alternative certification, and in 2006, I started teaching middle school math. And they, the school that I that I started working in. I'm actually back at that school now. But when I started there, oh my goodness, the students were huge. I am just under 5 feet tall.
Wow, you're like my
Cuban
wife. She's like
family, Cuban family.
4'11". Yeah,
Yes, I'm
yeah,
4'11" and three
yeah,
quarters. Um, so I started teaching middle school math, and I was assigned to the remedial students. So they basically were these like giant students that had repeated a grade, and like half of them probably should have been freshmen in high school. And I was very intimidated. And my first year was definitely rough, but my second year was just, I turned it around like easily. And my favorite thing about teaching math was explaining it in a way that they mostly understood. Um, and I still do this. Like I'll still stop and just, whatever I'm doing at work or whatever. I was talking to kids on Friday, and I would just stop and say, "Does that make sense?" Like, and just wait and see what they would say, because, you know, every teacher hates when a student says, "I don't get it." Like,
yeah.
okay, I need you to be specific. So, you have to find your stopping point so that it's clear, like, okay, does this part make sense? Okay, we can move on. And, I bring that into a lot of when I'm trying to talk about why I would be a great software engineer for your company, because I'm really good at explaining complicated problems.
My guess too is you've gotten really good at reading people and body language, because it's easy to say yes, but you could look at somebody's face or body language and say, you're just saying yes
Yes,
to move on, right?
yes, yeah. Their eyes glaze over. Yeah, yeah. Easily tell. But yeah, so I was a math teacher, middle school math. I taught all levels. I taught ESL, which was awesome, super fun. I taught the remedial students. I taught the inclusion students, pre-AP, of course. And then, so finally, I became the math specialist of our department. So then I started managing the teachers. Not as fun,
No.
but it did allow for more freedom, and I took more of a leadership role in the school, and ended up being someone that people turned to for all sorts of technology help. I mean, it was video making. I release my creativity through like photography and video, little silly things, and so I did a lot of that as well. And the school where I work there now again. It's just, I think maybe it's the student population being middle schoolers that just kind of brings the grown-ups together.
Do you so how long were you in that time in this school? How long were you there? Was that like for 5 years, like from 2005 to?
So I had some issues with my principal, and because I wasn't tied to the classroom, I wasn't abandoning any students. I left in December of 2014 and
So you were there a long
started.
time. I mean,
It
you're
was
like nine
definitely,
years.
yeah. Yeah, I was. I like to think that I was someone that they came to rely on. Like it was just there for whatever needs they needed. When I left, they still contacted me because they needed help with this or that. That was something that I used to do. They ended. I want to say probably like 90% of the school understood why I left, so, for the staff. But then I got a remote teaching job. I taught bilingual math online, and that was a really cool experience because I got to experience, working remotely. And well, that's when my husband and I decided to start trying to start a family.
Here at Ardan Labs, we believe in empowering companies to reach their full potential through innovative technology solutions. Trusted by small startups and Fortune 500 companies alike, we specialize in high-performance software consulting, training, staffing, development, and now AI. With over 14 years of experience, Ardan Labs has trained over 30,000 engineers and served over 1,000 companies worldwide. Whether you're mastering Go, Rust, Kubernetes, Terraform, or blockchain, we're your strategic partner for performance-grade solutions. Let's elevate your tech journey together. Reach out to Ardan Labs today.
Okay, so a few questions, because you're teaching middle school kids for almost a decade, around 2005 to 2014, you said.
Mm-hmm.
So I did, I taught middle school kids for 10 years, religious education for 10
Oh,
years.
cool.
And at the end of the 10 years, I had to stop. I was burnt out because I felt the kids were getting more and more immature every year. It was either that or I didn't have the patience anymore. I don't know which one it was. So I love meeting people who's been taught for that long because my question is always, did you see some sort of immaturity over the years with the next set of kids, or did I just become a cranky old man? It's like basically.
No, I think that's accurate. And have you seen that video of a guy like he runs into the door frame and he's like someone born in the 80s is like trying to fight the door frame. And then like someone in the 90s or like, you know, someone dressed like they're from the 90s or whatever, like hits the door frame and they're like, whatever. And then it's like the 2000s and they start being like, oh, like so yes, like they do like it's kind of like they're a little bit whinier.
Okay, so it wasn't me just getting older. I was still young then anyway, but no, it
I
was
mean,
mind
it could
blowing.
also be me getting older.
It's just interesting to think about because if you experienced some of the same things with these kids just getting more mature, it was like, yeah, I was burnt out after 10 years. I even had to tell the director, I said, I can't do this anymore. Because at
And it's
that point,
interesting that they're, yes.
no, no, go on, go on.
Well, it's just interesting that they're getting more immature because it's almost as if, well, they are having to be more mature with other aspects of their lives that are changing with technology and everything.
When COVID hit, because I do a lot of training, I did a lot of corporate training. I lived on the road for 3 years from like
Wow.
2017, beginning, like end of 16 through right there when the pandemic hit in March of 20. I was on a plane 32 weeks out of the year. I was all over the planet.
Wow.
In fact, I was in Greece, Israel and Greece were my last two trips when March of 20 hit. And then everything got grounded. And I was like a little nervous, didn't know. I knew I was going to get home, but you still didn't know, right? Like right at the
Yeah.
end of it. So, and now suddenly I've been living on a road. I don't have a life at home. And now I'm stuck at home, right? It was weird stuff. But I had to transition from being in a classroom, which I love. I love sucking the energy out of the room because everybody would be exhausted at the end of my class. And I had all this energy. And it's because I was like a vampire, right? Like I needed it. To then having to do this in front of a camera, which was just horrific because nobody will put their cameras on because I don't
Hmm.
know why. Like if you're in the classroom, you can't turn your face off. I don't know why we get to do that on camera. I might as well just been talking to the wall, right? So it was exhausting. I couldn't do more than I could do an 8 hour day in the classroom. I couldn't do more than 4 hours in front of a camera. It was I was going to be put away, but it was hard. Eventually, I learned how to do it better. But I'm curious what your experience was because you went through the same thing. You went from being in a classroom, physically present, reading body language and people, to now being disconnected over a lens. So, talk to me about your experience with that.
So you're talking about when I switched to teaching math remotely?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was different. Especially they called me a bilingual math teacher, but it was more like a tutor because the kids would come in when they needed help. So it wasn't as if I had classes. And so that, of course, makes it way worse. And around that time, I think is when 21 Jump Street came out because everyone would pop in and type, "My name is Jeff," and then leave. I had the students' information as far as like whose class they were in. And so I could pull it up and be like, hey, do you think Miss Robinson would like to know that you're messing around in the chat right now? And usually they would be like, oh my gosh, how do you know that? But yeah, no, it was very definitely, you're very disconnected from the learning. And I think my first year I was full time and then I went to part time. And that's whenever my husband and I decided to start trying for, he's a math teacher as well. We started trying to start a family. And I was trying to think of, because I was like, should I go back to the classroom, but like when you have kids, it's just so much harder when you're responsible for a classroom, to pull yourself away for an emergency or, whatever. Friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, she was the librarian at the school where I worked. And I was always in there and I was always reading young adult. And she was like, why don't you go to school, get your master's, and become a librarian? And I was like, oh my gosh, that would be so great. Because I was always in there. I was always checking out books. I was always reading young adult. So I was like, I could be a middle school librarian. Like, that's awesome. So I was pregnant with my daughter and I applied and I got in. And so when she was a few months old, I started taking the classes for my master's degree. And
What school? And
that's,
I guess that was online at
oh
night,
yeah,
or what school was that you decided?
it was the University of North Texas, Denton, because they
Okay.
are American Library Association certified, recognized. And so I didn't want to limit myself to being a school librarian. So with that degree, I could work in essentially any library.
So do they still do the Dewey Decimal System? Because that got pounded into me in elementary school. And I want to
They
feel like that
do.
knowledge is still okay.
Yes, we do still use it. We are actually trying to set up our nonfiction to look more like a bookstore so that it's more welcoming than like, a bunch of numbers and confusion so the students can find what they're looking for without being like,
Like
what do these numbers mean?
fiction, alphabetical order, nonfiction, alphabetical order. Yeah.
Yes. And the fiction we actually have organized by subgenre. So if you already know that you prefer fantasy, go over to those books with the yellow stickers. That's fantasy.
But you're still cataloging that even though if you're using the computer. I can still go to the computer and look it up and
Uh-huh.
sort of be told
Yes.
where to go.
Yes, we have the digital catalog.
When my kids started school, let's say Brianna was born in 96, so she'd start school like maybe that year 2000, 2001 or something. And I went into a library for the first time in God knows how many years. I was lost. I was like, where are the cards? And like, no, the computers are over there. And I was
Yeah.
lost. It was like a really weird experience for me because you lived in libraries. I did. I mean, you prayed that the book was there. You prayed
Mm-hmm.
there was a periodical there because if it wasn't, what were you going to do? So that's super interesting. But how many systems do they have? Like the Library of Congress has its own system. They don't use Dewey Decimals, right?
Oh
Like
my
there's too
gosh,
many
yeah.
books.
I haven't used that in a long time.
It's the only thing I know. It's funny. Okay, so you went back to school. How long did it take you to get that master's? Is that like a 2-year program you're able to do?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
okay.
I think I finished in a year and a half because I did summers. But after your first 12 hours, you can start applying for a librarian job and then just continue.
Oh, I was gonna
Yeah.
ask you if
So
you were working during that. So
yeah. So I got my first librarian job after my first 2 semesters, and it was in a different school district than the one that I started in. It was very different clientele. And because where I started, a kid would come in with a black eye, and you would just assume like, oh, you got in a fight, or like maybe they had just been suspended. Whereas at this other school that I went to, a kid came in with a black eye, and I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? My horse kicked me, and I was just like, what? So it was just very interesting, like jumping from this school district to this other school district.
uh,
And, like meanwhile, I'm a new mom. I'm still taking my courses online. And then Hurricane Harvey flooded our house. We had to move in with my parents for 6 months. Yeah, because our house got 20 inches of water.
what year is that? That's 15, 16,
2017.
2017.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, because my daughter was almost 1. She took her first steps in my parents' house.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah,
only
it
been
was a
through
lot.
one hurricane where it was a Cat 1 and it scared, and I've been here since 94. I missed Andrew by 2 years. But
Oh,
I went
wow.
through one Cat 1 and I never want to go through that again. And that was a Cat 1. And I can't imagine anything stronger than that. Like, don't want to imagine anything stronger than that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
devastating.
it was, and it wasn't even the hurricane itself, it was the flooding that it caused, the rain, the heavy rain, like the clouds just sat over Houston for, days. So that was, I remember, because I had discovered in like 2010 that if I was under too much stress, that my body would react. And so for the second time in my life, my body reacted to stress. And I got these like weird little dots on my fingers, and they went away after a few days,
Oh.
but I was like, what in the world is this? But it was just like every time I touched anything, it was like really sensitive. And I was like, it's my body reacting to stress, I guess, because it was a lot.
It is funny. Like I never ever had stress until I went through the divorce, and there would be nights where I couldn't stop shaking, and I knew what was happening. Like the stress level had
Wow.
reached a point where my body would just be like this, and I couldn't stop. Where you felt cold, but you're not cold. Um,
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yes, yes.
yeah, no, it's amazing what stress can suddenly you just weird stuff, right?
Yeah,
Starts
because
happening.
we had at the time we had a dog and a cat, and so we didn't want to leave the house. And we still had power, but as the water was, we went up to the loft because our house had like an addition built in the 80s, and so it's like an extra living room and then like a office space upstairs. And so we went up there with the animals, and as we're watching the water rise in our house, my husband's like, maybe I should go shut off the power before it hits the
Yeah.
outlets. And so he went and did that. And like, I mean, we've been scuba diving with his family, so we have wetsuits. And so he went out there in a wetsuit because that water was so
Oh,
disgusting.
yeah.
Yeah, and shut off the power. And then we were able to, one of the houses, our neighbor two houses down, his house was dry and he had power. So we eventually, like, we had this like blow up kayak. And so we put like a piece of luggage on it. I carried my daughter, and my husband carried our 90-pound dog. And then we came back for the cat. She was just hanging out in the loft. We came back for her when the water went down a little bit.
Wow. 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 Yeah. I've never
Yeah.
experienced. I don't want. I mean, I've never experienced it. You see that stuff on TV, but that's wild. So, how many days did it take for the water to finally recede enough where?
So it receded that same day that it was up 20 inches. And my dad has a truck. At the time, I drove a Honda Civic, and my husband had a Honda Fit. Neither of those are meant for any sort of water. So my dad came and picked us up in his truck, and we got the cat in the carrier and everything. And so yeah, we moved in with them for 6 months. Leela took her first steps at their house.
And then you had the house. You were able to get the house restored.
Yeah, so after six
Yeah.
months, yes, they had to basically remove like the bottom half of the drywall all
Yeah.
over the house. We had to throw away most of our furniture. Um, we did lift a lot of stuff off the ground. Like we put we didn't lift the furniture up enough because we didn't expect 20 inches.
No, no, it's a lot of water. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have been crying. I hate water. God, I hate. If you're a homeowner or you're thinking about buying a house, just wait because water finds its way everywhere.
Oh
Just
gosh. Yeah.
can't stop water. Okay, so you get this, you got your master's degree. You're already working as a
Yes.
librarian in this school. You do the 2 years, you get the degree. So now what year is it? Is it
So I
19 at
I
that point?
I actually, because it only took me about a year and a half, so I ended up getting it in 20 finishing up in 2018, I believe.
Nice.
Because
How did that
then,
feel? Now you got a master's degree. Like you didn't want to go back to school. Now you got the dad must have been happy that you got this master's degree.
yeah, yeah, and it's funny because the other day my mom and I mean, we'll get to my medically complex child, but my son was having a procedure done, and he turned up to be positive for rhinovirus, which is, it's a virus that causes a common cold. And my mom was like, "Oh, that's the same as RSV." And I was like, "No, mom, it's not. They're different." And like I kept sending her like articles or like screenshots. And it's funny because like there have been a few moments since getting my master's where I'm like, Mom, like I literally have a degree in library and information science.
It doesn't matter how old you get. I'm 55 and my mom is 70. I don't even know how old. She's almost 80 years old. And it doesn't matter. Like psychologically, I'm still 6, right? Like
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
It
Yeah,
doesn't
she
matter.
was like, okay. She calls me my dad's name when I'm like really like passionate about being right, right about something. She's like, okay, Gabriel. Like,
So, now it's 2018. We're only like 6 years out. Like, tell me what triggers you to start deciding that you want to move away, or maybe you don't want to move away from the librarian sort of study or career, but what gets you starting to think about software development?
so actually, I think around 2015, a friend of mine that's a software engineer, he graduated in '05 as well. But I didn't meet him for a couple more years. But he has been a software engineer. He studied computer science. And he was trying to get me to do like UI UX for like an app he was trying to make. But I had no idea what that meant. I started kind of looking into it around then. I think I stumbled on a Udemy course, like, 5 million other people in the world. But then I got pregnant with my daughter, and I was like, okay, well, let me go back, let me stick to something I know, education. Because so I worked in this one district for my first 2 years of being a librarian, and then I went back to my old district because a job opened up over there, and I knew I wanted to go back to a middle school setting. I am not built for the elementary school library. And so I went back to this other district, and I was pregnant with my twins. And so that was when the pandemic hit, because I was pregnant with them when I started this job in 2019. And then I had them in November. And then I came back from maternity leave like end of January 2020. And I mean, I was there for like 2 months, right? And then everything shut
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, in March everything starts to shut down. March, April.
Yes. And
My
so,
wife was teaching too at the time. She was teaching middle school robotics at the time, all that.
oh, wow.
So I have sort of indirect experience with the nightmare every teacher and school administrator went through during that time, to the
Yes.
point where
Yes.
I finally said to her, now that you don't have to work anymore, I don't want you to be a teacher anymore. That was
Yeah.
rough. That was rough. Rough, rough.
Yes,
Tell me, yeah, but
definitely.
tell me
Yeah.
more.
Because my husband was doing his math teaching. So my one of my favorite okay, well, so I got to spend this extra time with my twins, which, was actually great because they were still so young and I was nursing. And the youngest twin, he was actually born with vascular association, so he has a grocery list of medical needs that he was born with and that were then discovered around the pandemic. He was in the NICU for a month after he was born because his trachea and his esophagus were fused together, and so they had to
Mm,
operate and separate them. And so that's the main concern. Like, it's affected his respiratory system. So when he was about a year old, drinking, like, he was already, or excuse me, when he was 5 months old, he got rhinovirus for the first time and was in the hospital for 3 weeks, intubated, extubated for 3 weeks. It was the most horrific time of our lives. I mean, they didn't know why he could not, his breathing wouldn't slow when they took him off of the respirator. And like when you see a 5 month old breathe like 90 breaths per minute. I mean, it was just horrifying. And so, that was just the beginning of his hospitalizations. He had a couple more surgeries in 2020, and 2020 wasn't that bad after that because everyone was still masking. And so he's immunocompromised, but it wasn't a big deal, as big a deal because everybody was masking. So around 2021, he starts getting sick regularly and ending up in the hospital every few months. And he choked on his dinner one night. And my husband I mean, I was trying to resuscitate him. He started getting stiff and turning blue. My husband had to, he was trying to resuscitate him. He ended up doing mouth to mouth and, getting him breathing again. I was calling the ambulance, freaking out. We ended up going to the hospital. He had aspirated like food into his lungs and they had to operate.
whoa.
And so, I mean, yeah, like he almost died in that moment. And then when he was on the operating table, he almost died because he started choking on the food again. And so they discovered that on top of everything he was born with. He also has, or that they discovered when he was born, he also has a laryngeal cleft. So he can eat food fine, but he cannot drink regular liquids. Like they have to be thickened. And so
Mm.
he has, yeah. So we finally got him in swim classes this summer because he understands that he cannot drink regular fluids. Like he can't drink pool water, like on purpose. You know, accidents happen. But so, you know, we're moving slowly. He has an upcoming surgery to correct that. But yeah, so he is part of the reason that I was finally like, you know what? I need to do something different. I need to be more flexible. And interestingly enough, one of my favorite classes that I took when I got my master's was a web development course. And I ended up like tutoring one of my classmates because she was a little bit confused on some of the course. And this hasn't come up at all, and I apologize. But since around 2010, like I was blogging and kind of tinkering with code in that regard. But that was like my side hustle because like I would work with ad networks, and I still do. I work with different brands, and except now it's on Instagram because I retired my blog. But so I've always kind of tinkered with that. I don't know if you remember LiveJournal, but like I
Yeah.
tinkered with the code and
Yeah,
yeah,
I've
on
heard of live
LiveJournal.
journal.
Yeah,
Yeah, a little
yeah. So
bit.
that was in college. I tinkered with like, you know, just the HTML and stuff in the background. But yeah, so I always kind of had that in my back pocket. And so that's why my friend like tried to pull me into UI UX because he saw like all the creative stuff that I would publicize through my blog and everything. And so yeah, so I at the beginning of 2023, I started with Free Code Camp, and I discovered 100 Devs and Scrimba. And then I kind of, for like one of the projects for the classes, I built a web app to calculate the tube feed rate because my son was also diagnosed with failure to thrive because breathing is just such an effort for him that he burns so many calories that way that like he isn't growing as fast as his twin brother. So when we were in the hospital, one of the many nights that we were in the hospital, 22 was the worst. He was hospitalized 9 times. And I noticed that some of the medical staff at night would kind of be overwhelmed with the amount of information that they received. So my husband and I, with our math backgrounds, we would sometimes have to calculate the tube feed rate or the amount of formula he needed because the dietitian wanted him to receive his formula at a certain rate. And he still eats by mouth. So like all of this is limited to between dinner and breakfast. So like his situation just kind of threw a wrench in things, and people couldn't easily be like, you know, he normally eats or he gets tube fed like 5 times a day at this rate for this amount of time. And so that I was like, you know what, let me see if I can just make a little web app for it, right? And so I did that, and I started going to these JavaScript meetups, and I shared it with the group, and they were like, oh my gosh, have you shared this with like anyone from the community? And I said, no, this was just something I was kind of tinkering with. And so they kind of encouraged me to share it with these Facebook groups I'm a part of for Tubi families. And they were so supportive. And like, they were like, can I bookmark this? Can I save this? Can I share this? And actually met with someone a few weeks ago that I met through, because I started going to, so for a year, I was teaching myself. I felt kind of alone. You know, I started a tech Twitter, but I didn't really have a community there yet. So I was like, I think it was November, and I noticed that there were tech conferences. I used to go to blogger conferences all the time. I loved blogger conferences. And I was like, oh my gosh, why don't I try going to a tech conference? I used my teacher discount on one ticket, and it was in Texas, so I didn't have to fly or anything. And then I used my teacher discount on the other ticket. So first I went to that conference in Austin, and then I went to the complete opposite, which I had no idea about. I just saw that they had a teacher discount. I went to Render ATL,
That's a big
and I
conference.
had, yes,
Yeah,
and
that
I
one's
had the
big.
Southwest points for it, but it was it was very intimidating. But like I made friends, and I mean, that's when like the networking truly started. I made friends that I keep up with on Twitter, people that want to help, like just because they're so nice and so sweet. And so so I met with someone from the community, and they helped me create a roadmap a roadmap a roadmap to improve on the tube feed rate app and make it to where, it'll you could have users and it would save information and you could plan the meals and it was calculate the caloric intake that you need for that day. I mean, I have a whole list, and the first thing I have to do is not so hard, but everything else I'm like, okay, well, I'm a front end, right? And so and now I need to learn the back end so I could really like make this thing helpful.
I think it's amazing you have this project. Like when people come to me and they say they want to learn this and that, I'm like, you have to find a project. Once you find a project, then your learning will accelerate because you've got something to sort of solve. But you're solving a problem that's personal, but it sounds like you're going to be able to help a lot of people in the process once you
I hope
really,
so.
I think you will. Are you looking at this being browser based or are you actually looking at mobile? Like what
So
tech are you using
for
right now?
right, and I mean, like I said, it's just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript right
Okay.
now. But I think my first step is to make it a progressive web app, and then the next steps are like I need to figure out what kind of backend I want, and just I mean that's the part that's like going to be all new for me, which is
So
where
I'm
I am in my learning. So
so I'm kind of curious, and actually I'm not even going to interject here. Why have you not thought about more formal education for this? You did that for the librarian stuff, which I guess you did because the school required the degree. Nobody's
yes,
requiring the paper. So
yeah.
you're going down this other track, but have you thought about maybe a more formal sort of path?
I mean, as a parent of small children, one of them being medically complex, a lot of our money is being funneled back that direction. So I do crave the structure of a formal education, but I'm like, okay, you have 2 degrees. You know, I've done hard things. I can do harder things, and and that's kind of why I force myself to go to conferences because I need the kick in the butt to like, keep me motivated and so I can see like where I want to be because some days are just fine and some days I just want more. And those are the days where I mean, I open my computer every day, but those are the days where I'm like, okay, you know, let's open up like 5 more tabs, which is not helpful at all.
But I'm not sure when you have time to sleep because you have a full-time job. You have 2 full-time jobs, right? And then you're finding how many hours a week are you getting? Are you sort of squeezing out to work on this? Is this like a couple hours every night? Did I just take some development time from you now for you to kind of talk
No,
to us?
you no, so I do most of my work. I'm able to do most of my studying on the weekend. Weekdays, I'm lucky if I can get an hour in. I wake up at 4:15ish to go to the gym because that's my like decompression time. But it's also been a really fun journey because it shows me that I can do this routine and I can, make the progress that I need to make in other areas of my life. So I don't know. I kind of try to set them parallel to each other where I'm like, okay, this is something hard that you finally are able to manage and do. And so I did roller derby for 5 years. So I know
Whoa,
that
whoa, whoa,
I
whoa,
know that I can do
whoa!
the hard things.
Time out. I love roller derby. How could you just throw this at me right
It
now?
just never happened to pop in like into the
Whoa, whoa! What
conversation.
years were you playing roller derby? That's
I
amazing.
played for Houston Roller Derby from 2010 to 2015. I was a jammer for the Bayou City Bosses.
What? Okay. I'm going to have Kevin, who's listening right now, make sure we get some links and pictures of this. And we put this on the YouTube video because that is amazing. I watched that roller derby when I was a kid on my black and white television. And any movie that
Well,
has roller derby in it, I'm on board.
not to get your expectations too high, but I was on flat track, not the bank track. that is probably the most televised roller derby. Flat
I've never
track was
seen
like
flat.
considered sportier, I guess, because the bank track was like kind of like wrestling.
Yeah, that's what I think about. Like you're there going,
Yeah, yeah.
come out with the
Oh,
elbow.
I mean, oh no, like I definitely when we played New Orleans, those girls played dirty and they would purposely like hit me between the legs so I would trip. That was the first time that I got a bloody mouth guard. And I mean, it was like bloody.
Oh
But
my
yeah, it
God,
was really
I'm
fun.
not messing with you now. I'm keeping like arms. That's it. No more Roxy. I ain't getting Roxy mad. She's got that. She's got that.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Oh my God, it's brilliant. I gotta find. We're gonna find pictures or something.
That's
Kevin, your
always my fun
job.
fact.
Yes. No, that's the most amazing fun fact ever. That Kevin, we're finding pictures. There's no way. Um.
No.
So let me ask you a question. If somebody, there's a lot of people right now, and I'm at least in the Go community that are they're looking for projects, right? Like if you're looking for a job, you need a GitHub. Like you need a GitHub. You need to show code. You got to somehow distinguish yourself over everybody, especially now with God knows how many, I don't know, 150,000 engineers over the last year and a half, sort of losing jobs, which is horrific. And so if if a couple people knocked on your website, knocked on your GitHub and said, "Hey, I've got 3 months to spare. Would you like some help building out your back end?" Are you looking for that, or is this something that you really kind of want to do on your own? You're looking for more, maybe mentorship and code review.
I would love that, but I would like to learn it along. Like I would kind of like to not look over their shoulder because everything is virtual now anyway, but I feel like that would be like such a good way to learn it. The JavaScript meetup group that I'm in, so I'm currently studying React, and they the leader happens to be working on a React project, and so me and this other guy are supposed to be working on it with him, and like that I that's what I did when with the website for the group. And so that's kind of how I got more comfortable with that as well. And so this is obviously like everybody knows building is like the best way to learn. So yes, like that's why I would definitely, want to be over their shoulder and just ask 5 million questions because
Oh, no,
I
no,
think
that's
that
fair.
would.
Have you been searching for programming position right now, or are you looking right now?
Yes.
Okay, how's that been going? This is one of the things I did want to talk to you about because I know how hard it is right now with the number of people who are unemployed and the number of people who are coming out of university with college degrees. So my nephew's having the hardest time after going through a boot camp and learning. If he doesn't, they don't, they
Yes.
basically reject him 10 times a week saying that he doesn't have a degree. They don't care. They don't even care what he can do. So I'm kind of curious what you're going through right now.
Yeah. So the closest I got was in June, actually. I don't, it was a entry level position, and I think it was like a little cohort that this company does every few months. And they sent me a take home test, and I loved it because it was math. And it was a construction company. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome because I have a notebook and I'll brain dump into it before solving the problem. And so that's what I did. And then, and then I broke it down into, the code that I knew. It was magic squares. I don't know if you've heard of that. You have to verify that the sum of all the rows matches the sum of all the columns in a square. I
Okay.
think this one was a 9 by, or excuse me, a 3 by 3. But but yeah, so it was very interesting, and it was leading up to a hiring event or like an interview event, but I was going to render. So when I sent in my answer, I also sent in a Loom recording of me explaining my thought process. Just because as a math teacher, I just showing your work, I think, is just very important. And so I went through all that, and the HR woman was like, oh, I'm so sorry you can't make it to the event. She sent me her LinkedIn information and told me to add her because they hire for this position every few months or whatever. And I was like, okay, well, at least that's a good sign, right? So that's the closest I've gotten.
But you
Because
got
yeah,
an
like,
interview. That's
I mean, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, the interview event that, yeah, I couldn't make it to because I was like, okay, I was thinking about like all the connections that I would make versus, the one interview that I maybe got that may or may not lead anywhere anyway. So I've been trying to go into like ed tech because of my background, or like apply to ed tech, or like even I've never, like the medical field, but obviously the coding side of it. Um, because I don't know, I have a lot of knowledge as in that regard as well. So, I'm just trying to kind of find my footing somewhere, but obviously no one wants a noob. So it's
No,
just
it's tough.
difficult.
It's tough. But I think that if you could get this project to a certain point, it gives you that huge advantage that you've built something and you can get it in production. Then you can say, hey, I actually have 2 degrees. It may not be in computer science, but I've got this degree, I've got a master's, and I've got a product in production that people are using. Like nobody coming out of school has that. I think that's your differentiator immediately, that you can always point, because you put that on your resume, somebody's going to go to that URL. They're going to go, you built this? Oh, yeah, yeah, we got to talk to her. I think
Yeah.
that would be huge.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You get so focused on what everyone's asking for or what everybody wants. And then it's like, like in what I already have my to-do list, and that list the roadmap that I created, or that my friend helped me create, like that is on my to-do list, but it's like, trying to find the time to do these like 2 or 3 other things first. And so, I think I need to maybe rearrange my list a little bit.
Who knows? Maybe somebody will give you $10 a year to work on, use the platform even. Like, I think there's opportunity there. You just got to get one person to give you $1 and you've created like worth, right? I always say that with any startups that I've started. As soon as somebody's willing to pay me $1 and they do it, then we've got something. How long will it take me to get that dollar? 2, 3 years, and you're set.
Oh yeah,
I
there
think
you
you've
go.
got it. I think you've got this amazing idea. Unfortunately, I'll say that it's something that you're going to be able to, you have to use, but because of that, you're going to solve this problem so well for so many other people that I think it's worth $1. Somebody to pay $1. So if it was me, I'd be like, heads down. Let's build this thing out. Get it to a point where it's functional enough, somebody to give you $1. Then you don't have to work for somebody else. You're working,
Oh,
right?
there you go. Yeah.
You've got your own little business going, and you can get
Yeah,
there. And
kind of
then
like
eventually somebody will buy it from you. So that's it right there.
entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think that's right. Forget about working for somebody else, Roxy. Right? Build your product. You've got a product here that nobody can build it better than you. Nobody can build that better than you.
Yeah.
So,
I shared it with one of Sebastian's former nurses that I'm friends with online. I was like, I can't believe I haven't shared this with you. I'm sorry. And she was like, oh my gosh, can I share this with the staff? And I was like, yes, please.
you have a product here. You just got to get it to a point where, and you're never going to feel like it's ready. It's never going to be done. You're never going to feel like it's professional enough. You're never going to feel like it's ready. But for everybody else who needs it, it's ready. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd love to see you just go heads down right now and make that happen.
Yeah. Maybe that was the kick that I needed.
All right, we
The
are
next kick.
basically out of time. So, Roxy, if anybody's listening to this and wants to reach out and has questions, or maybe even has time to help. Now, if you want to help her, you're not going to just do it yourself. You got to be prepared to get on a meet and pair program. I could see this working with some pair programming, especially up front, and then you do a little more programming, and then there's code review. So remember, this isn't you just heads down doing it. This is some pair programming, little PRs, the whole 9 yards. So if anybody wants to
I get to
sort of talk to
virtually
you,
breathe down their neck.
yeah. What's the best way for anybody to sort of reach out? And we'll put this in the show
Uh,
notes.
yeah, so my tech Twitter is Roxana Codes, Roxana Codes, Codes, super creative, I know. And Instagram is kind of where everything happens. Like I have my biggest community there, but Roxana Codes is the
Sweet.
where my tech stuff is. Yeah,
Brilliant.
Gerfeisty is my Instagram. GRRFE. That was my derby name. FEISTY.
This is brilliant.
Feisty is EI, by the way. It is not IE.
All right. Well,
People mistake it.
I appreciate you hanging out with us for all the time that you did. I think it's a great story. I'm really excited to see where the product goes, and I'm excited to have you on my timeline at Twitter now. So I'm gonna get to. I can't believe that when you send that tweet about you in the gym, it's 4 a.m. That's just mind blowing.
Yeah,
Now when I see that
5.
picture, no, my brain's gonna go. Yeah, I was sleeping.
Yep.
I mean, I've become a morning person as I've gotten older, but like 7 a.m. morning, not 5
Not 4
a.m.
a.m.
morning.
4 or 5 a.m.
So that's brilliant. All right, Roxy.
It was so nice
I really
meeting
appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is the Ardan Labs podcast signing off. And Bill and Roxy here. We hope to see everybody again real soon.